Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana sat on the bench and watched the children playing on the playground. After all, they were out on the street. It was getting a little warmer. And there was such a noise in the yard, as if it were at school during recess. Is it a joke? 3 9-story buildings next to each other and one yard. Of course it would be crowded all the time, and there would be couples of moms with strollers trying to force their way through groups of kids. Adriana hummed. Thank God, and the kids are older now and can walk in the yard on their own. It had been hard to cope with 3 before. Even now it was hard, but they had grown older, and at least they were a little more independent. They help her a lot, and they look after each other. Adriana had just gotten home from work. Today she had to do work not only for herself, but also for her former partner. Well, helping out a friend is necessary. She helped her out when Adriana came down with an intestinal infection at home. They always help each other out. Adriana sighed and looked at her hands. Calluses. Adriana had worked as a janitor in the same organization for many years. As it happened, the 40-year-old Adriana had no education. She had no father. When Adriana was in 11th grade, her mother became seriously ill and had a stroke. The woman was young, only 45 years old. What caused the stroke? No one knew. Adriana somehow went to school and didn't go to university because she was taking care of her mother, and there was no money in the family. Mom was paralyzed for 8 years. They lived on disability allowance, and Adriana got a job as a janitor in this organization, where she still works. After her mother's death, Adriana got a 2-room apartment and nothing else. It was too late to go to school. Adriana was ashamed to go to school at such an age, and she would not have been able to pass the entrance exams, so she stayed to work as a janitor. At the age of 25, she met Michael. He once gave her a ride home in his car. The girl broke the heel of her only decent shoes. She cried bitterly, sitting on a bench near the park. Michael came up to her and offered his help. That's how they met. And 6 months later, Michael proposed to her. There was no wedding. They just got married. And then Michael moved in with her. Since she didn't have her own place, he was connected to a village that was very far away from here. His parents were dead. He had a sibling who stayed at his parents' house. She already had a family of her own and 3 children. Michael didn't bother his sister. He went to the city to earn money and stayed here in a rented apartment. 9 months after the marriage, their first child was born. And then the second and third were born. That's how Adriana became a mother of many children. It was hard, but Adriana bore all the difficulties firmly. She believed that children are the flowers of life, and that they will always help their parents in their old age. For a long time, her husband worked as a driver in the same company. He was in good standing. The salary was not bad. Adriana would not have been able to sit so much in the maternity ward with 3 children, if not for her husband. He was able to provide for the whole family with the essentials. Of course, it was difficult. Money was still scarce, but they weren't starving. So what? That the children had to wear out their clothes, that Adriana could not always buy pantyhose or underwear, that she could not even buy paint to cover her gray hair, not to mention a barbershop. But they had a large and close-knit family. Adriana wondered. Friendly, though. That depends on how you look at it. All these years, Adriana considered herself lucky to have a husband. He always treated her with respect, never reproached her for working as a common janitor. He told her that he loved her because she was so simple and cheerful, and she believed him. As time passed, however, she began to think that they were so used to each other that they were already communicating like brother and sister. But Adriana comforted herself that this was as it should be. After all, they had been together for so long. They have 3 children. What kind of passion is there? What kind of attraction anymore? She's 40 years old, he's 43. And they just love each other with a mature love that will last into old age. Adriana sighed again and looked at the children. She smiled involuntarily. How grown up are they now? Ethan, 13 years old. Lisa is 12. Betty is about to turn 11. And they are so friendly, a lot of people envy her. How did you raise them so friendly? You tell me. I'm surprised when I see them together. Her neighbor, Grandma Kathy, told her, it just happened. We just love them very much, and my husband and I always treat each other well. Children are a reflection of us, what they see in front of them, and absorb as we treat each other. So do they. That's the secret. Baba Kathy was a little offended at the time. She thought Adriana was alluding to her family. Grandma Kathy had 2 daughters, and they were always fighting with each other. And when they grew up, they fought a lot too. Even when they got married and went away, they still managed to fight when they came to visit their mother, and their husbands fought with each other too. Kathy's grandmother was always yelling all the time at home, and she thought Adriana was insinuating that she and her husband had a bad relationship. That's why their daughters were fighting all the time. But Adriana paid no attention to her neighbor. Let her be offended if she feels like it. If she didn't understand what Adriana wanted to tell her, that's just her problem. And Adriana didn't need anyone else's problems at all. Adriana kept looking and looking at the children and didn't even notice how much time had passed. She had to get dinner ready before her husband arrived. She woke up when she heard a voice beside her. Adriana, what are you doing here? Are you out shopping, or are you late for work? Adriana flinched. It was her husband. God, he had already come home from work. She's still sitting here. Adriana got up from the bench in a jiffy and said, yes, I was a little late at work and sat here to get some rest and didn't notice how the time passed. You're really hungry. Let's go home. I'll make something quick. Michael looked intently at the woman, but did not answer, though something akin to disgust flashed across her face. But Adriana did not notice it. Hello. A sound was heard next to her. Adriana turned around. It was the woman from the house across the street, one might say, almost a neighbor. Her name was Christina. She was about the same age as Adriana. Well, about 3 to 37 years old. But she didn't look her age at all. She was 30 at the most. And that's if you're really picky. She always wore heels, always bright makeup, beautiful, fashionable clothes, long nails, and a plume of expensive perfume. She was making good money, judging by her looks and her expensive car. But it was rumored in the yard that her lovers provided. Christina was never married. She had no children. She worked in a bank. She took care of nothing but herself. Often her neighbors would notice one cool foreign car or the other coming to pick her up. But it had been a long time since anyone had come to see her, and Christina started to behave less provocatively. She did not wear very short skirts, though she still painted her lips with bright lipstick and wore heels. A very impressive woman. What can I say? But Adriana has never understood how one can live to the age of 36 and still not have a family. Can a woman do that? What does she live for? Who's going to need her afterwards? And who will take care of her in her old age? Will it be her lovers? I don't think so. Men can only have fun with such men. You have to be decent, humble, and family-oriented to be truly loved by a man. And Christina only needs her to have fun. She's a pleasure to spend time with, to brighten up a lonely man's leisure. Hello, Christina, greeted Adriana politely. Christina looked at Michael. He murmured something in reply to her greeting, and Christina wiggled her hips and walked to her house. Adriana and Michael went into the entryway. Michael followed his wife in, and he looked behind Christina. There was a strange expression on his face, but after a couple of seconds he disappeared into the entryway. While they were waiting for the elevator, Adriana said quietly to her husband, "Is that any way to dress at that age?" Michael frowned. "At what age? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Christina. Did you see the short dress she wore? It's unbelievable. To open her legs like that." Michael looked away. "Well, if her figure allows it, that's why she wears it. Her legs are skinny. Why not wear a short dress? He bit his tongue, and Adriana raised her eyebrows. Michael, but what have legs and figure got to do with it? I don't care if she looks like a teenager. How can you wear clothes like that at 36? I understand that she's single, all that, but you gotta have a conscience. No, I don't care about that. But I wouldn't wear a dress that's short, even if they wanted to shoot me, no way. How does she wear heels all the time? Her feet don't hurt. Michael looked at his wife from head to toe. It wouldn't suit you either. You don't have the figure to wear clothes and heels like that. I can't even imagine you in those clothes and heels. Adriana bit her tongue. Why did she find his words offensive, even though she had brought it up? What was she discussing? Christina and her husband. Perhaps men could never understand a woman's logic. And why was he so adamant about her appearance? Does Adriana really look that bad? She thought she looked pretty decent for her 40s. In the kitchen, Adriana quickly fried potatoes and meat, then made mashed chicken stew for tomorrow and vegetable salad. She fed her husband and children. Then her husband went to rest, and the children sat down to their homework, and Adriana leisurely cleaned the kitchen while she did her usual household chores. She thought of everything and nothing. Today she was concerned about her own health. Apparently, Adriana was going through a hormonal malfunction and was beginning to gain weight around her belly. She recently went to the doctor and had some tests. The doctor prescribed her one pill to take. Adriana bought them. And now she thought about those words. What did the doctor tell her? He said it was very important to have an active sex life at that age. That could be why she was having a hormonal malfunction. She was blushing and pale. At the doctor's office, the wife couldn't tell the doctor that she and her husband hadn't led any such life for a long time. Well, for about a year, for sure, it just kind of came out on its own. Adriana was in the hospital for an acid removal. After the hospital, she needed rest, and that rest lasted for over a year. Her husband didn't pester her about anything. Adriana was too shy to say or hint at anything. She is a decent woman. If her husband doesn't want anything, she will tolerate it. When she went to bed, she had the thought of snuggling up to her husband. Honestly, she really missed her husband's embrace, but he was already sound asleep, and Adriana sighed, turned to the wall, and fell into a restless sleep. A couple of days passed. Adriana continued to replace her partner, and she was very tired these days. She didn't have time to go grocery shopping. So one day, she asked her husband to go get some bread. Michael grumbled. Why didn't you come into the bakery? It was on your way, wasn't it? We might not have any nearby. You'd have to go a long way to find some bread. Michael, I forgot to come in. It slipped my mind. I'm so tired. I just don't have the energy today. I wouldn't have asked you to go myself, but my dumplings are boiling. I can't leave them to you. And by the time I've cooked them, it'll be too late, and there won't be any bread for sure. Why else do you want to put dumplings on me? I have nothing else to do. I've got nothing better to do than watch the dumplings. He was sitting at the table, holding a cup of coffee. His eyes were fixed. He was staring at one point on the wall, and his forehead was frowning. It seemed like he was thinking so hard that he even stopped blinking. Adriana never waited for him to respond. She looked at him intently, and then said, Michael, why aren't you talking? Are you going or not? Michael looked up. He looked at his wife strangely, his eyes fixed on her dirty apron and her disheveled hair. And then he said, yes, I'll go. He put the cup in the sink, got dressed, and left the apartment, taking his phone and wallet with him. Half an hour later, Adriana realized that her husband still hadn't returned. So there was no bread nearby, and he had to go to another store. She didn't worry. She went on about her business. But when another hour passed and Michael still hadn't returned, Adriana was frightened. She told the children that she would go outside, and she herself started running around the yard looking for her husband. She called him several times, but he didn't answer, although he was beeping. When she met her neighbor, she asked for her husband. Grandma Kathy, have you seen Michael? No, I haven't. What happened? Did he go out to get bread? He's been gone for over an hour and a half. I don't know what to think. I went out into the yard. I thought maybe he was hanging out with a neighbor somewhere. No, I haven't seen him. I've been sitting here for about an hour, but he hasn't been here. Oh, Adriana, maybe something happened to him. Some kids beat up a guy in another alley, and he was hospitalized. That's the trouble. That's the trouble. You must be careful not to be attacked. Adriana shouted at the woman Kathy on emotion. What are you so horridy? Your tongue is like a broomstick. You can't help what you say. You can't help what you fall. I can't stand it. What kind of a man are you? You say something disgusting at once, just to intimidate a man, just to annoy him. Does it make you feel better to tell me all this nonsense? Kathy's lips pressed together in anger. What have I said to you, you fool, Adriana? What are you saying to me? Why don't you look at yourself before you talk about other people? I'm just warning you, and you're just going to get all up in my face. Go look for your husband and don't come near me again. I won't talk to you anymore. I'll never talk to you again. You talk trash about me. I'm sick of it. And Kathy, the woman, spat in Adriana's direction. But the woman didn't even react to it. With each passing second, she became more and more worried about her husband. Where could he be? Why was he taking so long to walk somewhere? And if something really happened to him, what should she do? Where would she look for him? And how would she run through the yards at night? She ran everywhere for about an hour. First, she went to the nearest convenience store, where all the salesgirls knew her. She asked if her husband had come in today to get bread. The clerk assured her that her husband had not. Otherwise, she would have remembered selling him bread, because there was bread in the store, but he certainly wasn't. Then Adriana concluded that something had happened to him. Before he bought the bread, he would surely have gone to this particular store first, because it was the closest to their house. If he didn't go in, God, something had happened to him. She was running around all the yards in the neighborhood. She lit herself up with her phone, looked under all the benches, looked in all the yards. Then she started calling his name. After an hour, she was out of her seat, headed home. What to do next? Call the police or what? She got home, told the kids to go to bed. Then she sat in the kitchen, trying to figure out what to do. Then she called the city hospital. She wanted to see if a patient by that name had been admitted, but they sent her away, to put it mildly. They said if she wanted to know something, she had to come and find out for herself. No one would tell her anything over the phone. So Adriana called the police, but they just laughed at her too. And the woman did not sleep until morning, waiting for her husband to return. But he never came back. In the morning, she called at work, said her husband was missing, and she was going to the police. She herself went to all the hospitals all day, trying to find her husband. Then she went to the police, and they didn't have Michael either, but they said they could only look for him in 2 days. In the meantime, it was too early to sound the alarm. If the man didn't show up in 2 days, then let Adriana come and file a missing persons report. Adriana listened to them and went home. Just as she was about to go into the entryway, she was called out by the Bada Kathy's daughter. Hi, Adriana. I heard from my mother that your husband is missing. It is true. Adriana nodded silently. What a grief. What a misfortune. What on earth is that? Are they already on the loose in the evening? They must be the thugs who robbed the store a month ago. 100% I'm telling you. They attacked a guy back then too, but he got away. And if he hadn't gotten away, what would have happened to him? Adriana sighed and said angrily, Fuck you. You know, it's clear whose upbringing you are. Then she also complains about you, that you quarrel often. So she brought you up like that. Only bad things you talk about. Only bad things, and you think you're not very bright, don't you? That's what I think. The grandmother's daughter is furious. How dare you? Who gave you the right to insult me? Who do you think you are? Look at you, another righteous woman. Look at you. It's impossible to even talk to you. You're like a dog. You just jump on people, As soon as Michael lives with you correctly, my mother said that the man couldn't stand it and ran away from you. He just ran away from you. You hear me? Fool, I'm telling you for sure. Look at you. You're only about 40 years old. You're like a 60-year-old woman. It's not for nothing my mother says he was looking at other women, especially that woman in heels from next door. She's the one his mother says he looked at the most. Of course he looked at her. It's obvious to a fool. His own wife looks like a country cow. And this beauty is almost your age. But she looks like she's gonna rock. Everybody's seen it but you. Only you have rose-colored glasses on your eyes, as if you're not 40 years old, but 15. You're a fool. You should have nagged the man less and looked after yourself better and cleaner. And Kathy's Baba's daughter turned around and walked away, and Adriana remained standing in front of the doorway with her mouth open. What did she mean by that? What did she mean by looking at the others? What did it mean that everyone saw it? He was staring at Christina, and everyone saw it. Why didn't she see it? Why didn't she see anything? Maybe the bitch is lying about everything. But she said it so believably. What's going on? Next, standing in one place for a few more minutes, and then she could barely figure out that she had to go home. Were the children worried about their father? They started pestering their mother with questions, but Adriana sent them off to their room and sat down in the kitchen herself. For the first time in her life, she didn't do dinner in the evening. She sat staring at one point. What if Baba was right? As mean and jealous as this woman was, she was not stupid. And she sometimes noticed things that Adriana would never have noticed. What if what she said was true? And her husband just walked away. But immediately Adriana shook her head. No, he and Michael love each other. And he couldn't have done that. It's all gossip, jealous and angry women who just want to hurt her. Adriana stayed up at night again, and in the morning she could barely get up for work. She decided she would go to the police again tomorrow if her husband didn't show up. Somehow she worked and went home in the evening. Tonight she would have to cook dinner, because the kids need to be fed. And no matter what happens to her husband, the children are there for her, and they need to be taken care of. As she approached the house, she sat down on a bench for a moment. She sighed and lifted her head, looking at the house next door, where Christina lived, which, as Grandma Kathy had said, her husband was always looking at. What kind of people always see what is not there? It was better not to communicate with such people at all. And then Adriana held her breath. She thought she saw a man who looked like her husband on the 4th floor. From that distance, she could have been wrong. But when she saw the bald head, she somehow sensed that it might have been him. She stared for a long time, but she couldn't tell for sure. And then she did what she would never have done in any other situation. She knew roughly which apartment she had to go to, so she got up and walked resolutely toward that house. If she was wrong, she would just say that her husband was missing, and that she was interviewing the neighbors who had a balcony overlooking this side. Maybe one of them saw or heard something. That way she won't look like a fool. If her suspicions turn out to be unfounded when she took the elevator up to the 4th floor, she felt stupid for what she was doing. How could she have thought it was her husband standing on the balcony of the house next door? How could such a thing be possible? It was all Baba Kathy and her daughter. They put all this nonsense into her head. It just doesn't make any sense. But there was no turning back. Adriana decided to go through with it, to finally say goodbye to the delusional thought that had been buzzing in her brain for the 2nd day. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic pounding of her heart, and then pressed the bell. A few seconds later, she heard footsteps, and then the door opened. Standing in front of Adriana was Christina, the first hottie in their yard. As soon as Adriana saw her, her heart clenched treacherously. She sensed trouble approaching. Already that Adriana was not mistaken about the apartment, that she saw a man who looked like her husband. It was on the balcony that Christina looked painfully suspicious. The women looked at each other in silence and at Christina's face. Adriana realized that she was not mistaken. On the woman's balcony was indeed her husband. Adriana blushed and bit her lower lip. She was silent. Nothing, Adriana said. That is, she understood why the woman had come. Then Adriana said very quietly, "Why? I don't understand how you can do that. What are you for?" And then immediately said contemptuously, "I have nothing to do with it. Leave me out of it. I had nothing to do with it. He started it. I just let it happen. If you had a bad relationship, did I cause it? No, it started a long time ago. And he's been wanting to leave you for a long time. And he fell in love with me. What about me? Let him love himself. I like him too. He's a good man, passionate, attentive, caring. It often happens in life that a man marries the wrong woman and then finds his other half. That's how it worked out for us. Now Michael wants a fresh start, and he wouldn't even talk to you about it. He knew you'd get hysterical and cry. And men don't want drama. They want everything light and airy. And you're not light and airy at all. So if you want to talk to him, I can get him." Adriana didn't know if she wanted to talk to her husband after what Christina said. But then she realized that she just wanted to look him in the eye. There was no suggestion that he wanted to leave her, and she wanted to see what he would look like now that it had all happened. Christina nodded and closed the door. Adriana remained standing where she was. A minute later, the door opened again, and Adriana saw Michael. He was standing in front of her as if nothing had happened, except he wasn't looking her in the eye. He was silent, and so was Adriana. Then she said, "Look into my eyes." He looked, and that's when he got nervous. "Shouldn't he have told me to my face? Did you have to do that? Don't you realize I've been going crazy all these days? I've been to every hospital. I've been to the police. How could you? What will people say when they see you with her now? You thought about the kids. What will I tell them? Or what will they think when they see you with someone else's woman?" She said after a few minutes. Michael flared up. "Yeah, I don't care what they say. I don't have to answer to anyone. I'm tired of you and the kids. I'm tired. They don't put me in any position. They only listen to you. I'm tired of this life. And this wife. Christina is no match for you. We're serious. I'm going to file for divorce. Tell the children what you want. I don't care what they think." Adriana was surprised. What kind of monster was she living with? To do something like that. Going out to get bread and ending up at someone else's house. Going to go to the store and leaving her family. Turns out what a nightmare. And with this man she lived. Gave birth to 3 children by him. Adriana turned around and started down the stairs. Behind her, the door to Christina's apartment slammed shut. With a loud bang. Adriana's married life was over too. From now on she was on her own. During the week, Adriana continued to go to work, pondering the situation. She told her children the truth, omitting some details. Her children, thank goodness, did not throw tantrums. They just hugged their mother and said they would never leave her. A month passed. Adriana and Michael divorced, and a couple of days after the divorce, Adriana realized that all the neighbors already knew about everything, as usual. The first to find out about everything was Baba Kathy is the main gossip in the yard. She was the one who saw Christina with Michael, and she told the whole yard that the poor man had left his oppressive, horrible wife. She began to call Adriana names, calling her a monster. And then she got to her appearance as well. Said the cleaner should have taken better care of herself to keep her man. She couldn't raise 3 kids on a pauper's salary. Adriana was sickened that she would live in the same house as her husband, who had moved in with another woman. And she realized that if her life had changed so radically, she should change something to make her feel better. That the only thing she could change in this situation was her place of residence. Adriana decided that she needed to sell her apartment, and she wanted to buy a private house with a bigger vegetable garden, so she could get some animals and plant vegetables. It would be good for her to do something instead of sitting in front of the TV and feeling sorry for herself, and it will be a help for her. She can make pickles for the winter. Then she can sell them. You can have ducks, chickens. It is very valuable. But how to do it all? She had no idea. Well, nothing will somehow figure it out. And the children will help her if anything. She consulted with the children. And everyone supported her idea with enthusiasm. They too would like to live in a private house where they would be their own masters. So it was decided. It was a done deal. Adriana, on a tip from a friend, went to the agency, outlined the whole situation. The very next day, a realtor came to them. He carefully looked through the entire apartment, looking at all the angles, and then made his verdict. He said that the apartment was very good, even if it was not brand new. And the area was very nice, so the apartment could be a good sale. A week later, the realtor had already provided her with options for private homes. When Adriana visited all of them, she realized that the one house she liked best was the one on the very outskirts of town. Yes, it was a bit far, but there was a shuttle bus to the school, and there was a large vegetable garden. And the house wasn't bad. And the kids liked the house. There were 3 rooms. Now the girls could sleep in a separate room, and Ethan would have his own bedroom. The children were even willing to put up with the long drive to school for that. Adriana agreed to this house, and after another week, a buyer had already been found for her apartment. The deals were done fairly quickly, and Adriana and the children moved into their home. With a sigh of relief, getting pets didn't work out. Turns out, it's not cheap, and it was unaffordable for Adriana, who worked as a cleaner and was now raising 3 children alone. After a while, she realized she was catastrophically short of money to live on. The house was more expensive to maintain than the apartment, and not because the utility bills were higher, but because something had to be done all the time in the private house. Now the lock on her door broke. Now the gate stopped opening. Now the roof leaks when it rains. Now this or that. And Adriana started to think. Somehow she hadn't thought it would be like this. Now she was beginning to think she had made a mistake, trading her apartment for a private house. However, looking at her happy children, who got up early to get to school on time, she realized that everything was not in vain. Would her children have been happy if they had seen their father in the yard with a strange woman? Of course not. And Adriana realized that she needed to do her best to persevere in this life, so that a difficult life situation would not break her or her children. Adriana got to know her neighbors. On one side lived Kelly. She was about 50 years old, and she was not a very kind woman, although she always had a smile in her eyes. But Adriana knew right away that it was Baba Kathy, number 2, just as gossipy, just as greedy and jealous. Since Adriana didn't have anything worth having, according to Kelly, what was there to be jealous of? The neighbor was always talking about everyone else. Adriana didn't like talking to her, but she tried not to spoil her relationship with her roommate because she wanted to be on good terms with someone. And then Adriana got to know her neighbor. Miranda, on the other hand, turned out to be the exact opposite of Kelly. She was slightly younger than Adriana, and she was such a friendly and pleasant woman that Adriana immediately found common ground with her. Miranda often invited her to her house, but Adriana was uncomfortable, and she always refused, citing business. One day, Adriana felt so bad at heart that she accepted Miranda's invitation. She just needed someone to talk to share her work. And it doesn't have to be the children. Her children must be assured that she has everything under control. Miranda was delighted that Adriana had agreed to come to her. Oh, how wonderful. Then I shall expect you in an hour. You come right in the house. The gate will be open. An hour later, Adriana was already at her neighbor's house. Miranda had managed to make a quiche in time for her arrival. She also made some delicious cakes. She greeted her new friend with a smile and immediately began to talk about everything. Adriana felt warmed by such a reception, as if she came home to her mother and smelled so good with pastry and such fragrant tea made by Miranda. And the atmosphere in her home was very friendly and relaxed. Miranda was single. Adriana was not going to pry into her heart to find out the details of her private life. But Miranda herself spilled everything. She wasn't the least bit embarrassed. Yes, I live alone. You see, I used to worry about it, and then I stopped. Who cares? Who cares how I live? And I don't care about evil tongues and talk. I live my life the way I want to live it. You know, I just had an unhappy love affair. Oh, I got on my nerves when I was young. I fell in love, like an idiot, with a married guy. Only I didn't know he was married. He cheated on me for about a year. This handsome guy kept coming on to me, promised me he'd get married, swore he loved me, and he promised me so much more. I could write a whole poem. And so sweet. Come on, he was good at it. And then I found out he was married. Oh, what a scene he made for me. Naturally, I wanted to break up with him right away. And he threw himself at my feet and got on his knees and cried and sobbed. He said, "I love you, I can't." I would leave my wife. But no matter how long I waited, I was a fool. No one was going to leave his wife. And then I couldn't take it anymore. I called his wife, told her to stay out of the way. To our delight, she stepped away. So this madam came to me, all honest, all dressed up, all makeup, all beautiful. I don't argue. And this lady said she didn't want to keep her husband, let him go. Only he does not want to. He loves her madly, but his nature requires constant contact with other women, and she forgives him. They have, how shall I put it, a loose relationship. She cheats on him, and he cheats on her. They found each other, so to speak, and they were both fine with it. Only I wasn't happy with it. So I told him everything once again. And he was so businesslike. He said to me, "Let's just leave it like it is. He loves her, and I do not want to choose between us. He is happy with the way things are between us." Can you imagine? He even suggested that the three of us live together. Isn't he an idiot? Anyway, I cut all the loose ends and broke up with him for good. He followed me for a long time, and then he stopped. Apparently, he found himself another second wife, and I loved him very much, I really did. I haven't loved anybody else since. I decided I'd rather be alone than with just anyone. That's the way it is. Adriana listened to Miranda with her mouth open. Miranda was telling everything with such cheerfulness, as if she was telling a joke. Such an extraordinary woman. Her life didn't turn out the way she wanted it to. And she smiles and is not discouraged. We should learn from her how to behave. When you feel bad about yourself, Miranda, everyone kept talking about everything in the world. She talked about herself, about her childhood, about how her neighbors had been gutting her for a long time. And then Miranda was suddenly silent. It was as if she'd run out of batteries. "What's your problem?" she suddenly asked. Adriana blushed. "What makes you think that? That I have a problem? Come on, don't try to trick me. I can see that something is eating at you. You bought a house and moved in with 3 kids. I do not see a man near you, and in the very outskirts with 3 children they go to school. Where? Why all this inconvenience? Are you running from someone or hiding? Is someone chasing you?" Adriana wanted to say that Miranda was wrong, but she could not utter a word. She could not lie. And yet Miranda was right. Adriana had run away from a past life, and she is hiding here, trying to hide from the constant close presence of her ex-husband, who will remind her how deeply she went astray in life. So she moves here to try to heal in her wounds, and she does endure great discomfort with the move. But she won't admit it to anyone, so she decided to tell Miranda the whole truth. "Ex-husband. I moved so I wouldn't have to see my ex-husband. That bastard, is he stalking you? Threatening, blackmailing the children?" With feeling, said Miranda. But Adriana shook her head. It was much worse than that. And she told the whole truth to Miranda, holding nothing back, not a single detail missing. At first she was ashamed to talk about the man she considered loyal and faithful. But then the words themselves came off her lips, and when Adriana told her story, she felt so relieved, as if she'd dropped herself a carload of bricks. In fact, she had. Adriana was carrying the weight of her thoughts, resentments, anxieties, and worries on her shoulders. And when she shared her distress with Miranda, it was as if she shared her pain with her, and she breathed more freely. Yes, my friend, your life is like Santa Barbara. You have to go out to get bread. What a bastard. How could you leave your children behind so sneakily? Okay, a relationship between a man and a woman. Things happen. People get together and break up. That's understandable. But kids, I can't get my head around it. He just left. You know what I'll tell you. You're very lucky to be free of him. I don't know what else would have happened. You got off easy. Imagine if he had taken the apartment away from you, for example, and made it no longer yours. You never know. You trusted him, right? Did you at least have your own place? Yes, I realize now that it's a good thing I got rid of that man, even if it's in such a nasty way. But it doesn't make me feel any better. After my divorce, it was so hard for me to live that I'm not glad I moved here. The house is hard to maintain. I can't do anything in the garden because everything requires some kind of investment. How can I do anything without money? The kids need money for travel and food, and soon they need to buy things. I don't know, Miranda, as I see it. Miranda thought about it. She felt sorry for her neighbor, but she was well aware that pity would not get her far. She must act, and without delay. So there is nothing to be sad about. You have to believe that you can do it. You have to believe it. Get a grip and analyze the situation. Think about what you can do. Maybe change jobs or find a part-time job. You're still young and healthy. If necessary, and 3 jobs will work, as long as you have strength. But you have to be strong for the sake of the children. Adriana thought about it. That's right, she wouldn't change her job. No one would hire her without an education. But a part-time job was an interesting idea. Maybe she could do some cleaning in the evenings. Maybe she could work in a pharmacy or an office. Maybe a salon or something that needs a cleaning lady in the evenings. She'll manage somehow. Just have to find something. And after a couple of days, she got lucky. It was as if Providence itself had led her to this pole on which there was an advertisement. A social organization was recruiting new employees. 2 people were needed for the position of janitor in a nursing home and an orphanage. Adriana did not want to go to the orphanage. Everything to do with abandoned and lonely children gave her a terrible heartache. And it was on the other side of town. The nursing home, on the other hand, happened to be only 3 blocks from her house. There was a very large area, and they needed a janitor. Adriana wrote down the phone number to call. When she got home, she prayed that the janitorial position would be available at the nursing home. Then she could definitely get a part-time job. She called the number listed on the ad. And, oh, miracle, the janitor's position at the nursing home was vacant. They were willing to work the 2nd shift and didn't have to work there all night. They didn't require a person to be there a certain number of hours did the job. Free. This Adriana was completely satisfied. And the salary was quite decent. Of course, less than she earned as a cleaner, but not by much. That's just good luck. It would be a real help to her. Of course, the kids would have to help her. But she was sure that none of them would grumble because they were adults and understood everything. They could be relied upon. Adriana told this wonderful news to Miranda, and the neighbor was glad that Adriana had pulled herself together and found a way out. Miranda helped her too, but not intrusively. Naturally, Adriana would not have accepted help from her neighbor if the latter had offered her everything obsessively. But from time to time, Miranda would just offer her various goodies for the children and share with her some of the products she bought at a discount. Sometimes she would offer her something from clothes, arguing that her friend was sending her second-hand clothes from abroad, but not everything suited her. That was partly true, except that it wasn't her friend who sent these things, but Miranda bought them herself. That's how Adriana found a part-time job. And now she worked 3 evenings a week as a janitor. A month later, she got her first paycheck for her job, and she breathed a sigh of relief. It was easier now. Money had been added to the family. Adriana could continue to quietly provide for the children. Time passed. Autumn was over. Winter came, spring began. It was cold for a long time. Winter did not want to retreat, and only in the middle of April began to warm up. One day Adriana was on her way to work. Not far from the nursing home there were large garbage cans, fenced on 3 sides with a small fence. Adriana always threw garbage into one of the bins, and she saw a man by his appearance near the container. Adriana realized it was a homeless man. He was wearing black tattered pants that were all muddy, a black jacket with a stitched sleeve, and he was missing one leg in the knee area. His left pant leg was tied in a knot. He was leaning on a crutch and trying to dig through a garbage can. Adriana noticed that he was carefully depositing trash that was of no interest to him in the other bin. And what did fit him, he tossed onto the small cart next to him. Adriana slowed down slightly, watching him. When the bum rummaged through a bag of some kind and then pulled out a half-eaten bun, he looked around cautiously and then put the rest of the bun in Adriana's pocket. For some reason, I felt so sorry for him. Now that's the real horror. What a real nightmare. To come to this state. I wouldn't wish it on an enemy. Who was this man in the past? What happened to him? Maybe his place was taken from him, his apartment, and it wasn't his fault. And now he's forced to wander, digging through garbage, living on the street, in the heat and in the cold. Do people deserve that? To everyone, they are just the dregs of society. But society itself has turned its back on them. How then can such people be when they have nowhere and no one to help them? So they have to wander around, taking scraps out of garbage cans and trash cans, living on the street begging. And she never condemned such people for the fact that many became alcoholics. What else could they do? What else could they do? Maybe alcohol alone keeps them warm on frosty winter nights. Adriana sighed and walked closer to the bum. When he heard someone approaching him, he hurriedly left the trash can alone and wanted to move away to hide from the random passerby. His head squeezed into his shoulders. It was obvious that he was afraid he might get hit. That must have been what happened a lot. The man could not move quickly because he was missing one leg and the crutch was in the way. It was obvious that there was no way he could control it. Either he had lost it recently, or he was ill with something and his coordination was impaired. Adriana did not get too close. She stopped a few steps away from him. Then she asked if you needed help. Are you sick? Would you like an ambulance? Can you speak to men? How can I help you? Adriana honestly did not expect him to answer, but she wanted to take that step to prove to herself, to others, and to him that sometimes the world is not as bad as it seems, and that even in such a difficult and hopeless situation, it is possible to get help from another person. The homeless man stopped. He must have been shocked himself to find someone approaching him and speaking so politely. He turned slowly toward Adriana. His face was overgrown with a beard. His hat was pulled almost up to his eyes, but Adriana could see his gaze. It was strange. But the man had such intelligence in his eyes, as if a wise old man was looking at her, though he was hardly that old. Of course, it was impossible to determine his age in this form, but he was probably about 55 to 60 years old. Maybe he was even younger, and he wasn't a drinker. You could tell that from his face. His face was thin and haggard, but he wasn't drunk, and he smelled a little, but not like years of bums reeking of piss. That's right, you're telling me. His voice was soft but firm. Adriana was surprised there was none of the hoarseness in his voice that is characteristic of people who live on the street. And his voice was so unusual, so deep. He interested her even more. Adriana smiled slightly and nodded. Yes, I am addressing you. He was surprised. It was obvious. With his right hand, he moved his hat slightly to get a better look at Adriana. Perhaps she should have been wary of such a man. After all, he could have attacked her, hit her with his crutch, taken her bag and fled. But she was sure he wouldn't do that. And not because he was one-legged. It was because she didn't sense any danger coming from him. Thank you, young lady, but I don't need any help. I appreciate your consideration. I don't see that kind of attitude very often. That alone makes me feel warm." Adriana realized that the bum sounded strange. His voice and speech did not match his outward appearance. He must have been some kind of teacher or professor in the past, or maybe just an educated man who had had some kind of misfortune. She asked him again, "Are you sure I can't help you?" The homeless man looked at her carefully from head to toe and shook his head again. Then Adriana decided to help him as she thought necessary. She opened her bag, rummaging through her purse. She had one paper bill. After work, she had to buy bread for the children's sandwiches for the morning, but they can do without bread. When she comes, she'll make them some pancakes. She took the bill and handed it to the homeless man. He looked at the money with amazement. "Take it. I want to help you out a little. That's all I can offer you, but I think you can use this too. Take it, take it." The homeless man stood and shook his head negatively, looking now at the money, now at Adriana. And Adriana was so ashamed. He looked at her like she was offering him a few tens of thousands. Yes, it was money to her, and it was money to him too. But it was such a small thing compared to the deprivation this man lived in. Adriana had her home, her children, food, a warm bed, money to support her whole family, and she could give that money to him now. And he has nothing. And he still refuses money. He must have been so ashamed. Adriana persisted in offering the money to the bum, and then decided that she would just leave it. She wanted to leave it on the ground, but then she realized that it would be kind of ugly, and from the ground, it would be hard for him to pick it up. And then she walked right up to him and said, "If you don't pick them up now, I'll have to put them in your cart." And the homeless man with shaking hands took the money from her hands, trying not to touch it with his fingers. Adriana smiled contentedly and went to work. When she brought the garbage bag to the trash can after work, the bum was still there, only he was sitting on a small stool. Where had he gotten it from? Maybe someone had thrown it away. Adriana threw away the bag of garbage and was about to leave when she heard the homeless man's voice. "Thank you. I bought myself a loaf of bread and a bottle of water with this money, and I can eat for a few days without having to go through the garbage to find something to eat." "Sorry for the details," Adriana smiled and answered to my health. "I'm sorry. I couldn't give more because that's all I had with me." The bum put his hands out in front of him. "No, I didn't mean that at all. I didn't mean that at all. I thank you for your kindness in helping me. God bless you." Adriana went home. There was a slight smile on her face. She thought about the fact that to this bum she was a girl, and to others she was just an ordinary broad as a cleaner and a janitor. And no one thought about what was in her heart. Adriana thought about the next time she had to take something to eat with her to work. Just in case, maybe that man would be near the garbage cans again, and she would feed him. A day later she went to work again. Again she saw a homeless man near the bins. He positioned himself a little farther away, right next to the bars, and he recognized Adriana. When he saw her, she knew it by the way he looked at her. The bum kept staring into her face, but he made no attempt to approach or to call her. Adriana approached him and held out the package she was carrying in her hand. "Hello, take it. I brought you some food." He took the bag silently. She smiled at him and went to work. He followed her and said thank you. When Adriana went to the trash can again after work to throw away the bag, the homeless man turned to her. "Thank you for the delicious food. You are a very good cook. Only you forgot something in that bag. There was money in it. I didn't take anything, I promise. Take it." He handed her the money, but Adriana shook her head. She threw the bag in the garbage can and said, "I didn't forget anything. I'm the one who left you the money. This is for you. I just want—" "Who are you? What is your name?" The man sighed and lowered his head. He was silent for about a minute. Then he told her his story. "I think something happened to me. I hardly remember anything. I don't know my full name. All I remember is that my name is William. I've been living on the street for a long time. Well, a couple of years for sure. How I got on the street, I don't know. Maybe I did live on the street. Maybe I had an accident. I hit my head and lost my memory. I don't know. I was told they found me in the winter, beaten up. I was unconscious for a long time, and my legs were frozen. I couldn't save one leg. They cut it off. I was in the hospital, but I didn't have any documents. And the nurses were constantly mocking me. They said they would throw me out on the street if I didn't tell them who I was. Those documents I had, I couldn't remember anything. That's what I told them. And nobody was looking for me. So I might be alone in this world. So no one needs me. They discharged me later, said they couldn't hold me any longer. But a doctor took pity on me. He gave me some money and a crutch. I am very grateful to him. For a long time, I lived in the basement of a house. It was warm and nice there, and several cats lived with me. And then that basement was closed, and I couldn't get there anymore. Many of my things remained there, and there was a warm blanket and a pillow. The only thing that was left with me was this cart, and the things that were in it. I couldn't sleep in that basement in winter anymore. I had a hard time that winter. I hid wherever I could. Good thing it was a long winter, but not as cold as last year. That's it. That's my story. That's all I have to tell you. He sat with his head down, and Adriana felt so sorry for him. Not for nothing did she feel that he didn't look like an ordinary bum. He could have been anyone before he was on the street. Why wasn't anyone looking for him? Didn't he have any relatives? How could that be? I'm sorry you had such a hard time. I feel for you. You know, I work as a janitor in a nursing home. I come here on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I can bring you some food every time. Sometimes I can give you money, but not too much. I'm sorry, as they say, whatever I can do to help. What are you talking about? I'm not asking you for money at all, and you don't have to bring me food every time I need it. You've given me enough today to last me 2 days. I don't eat much at all. Thank you very much. You are so kind. And Adriana, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday since then, she brought William something to eat, and he was so grateful to her, and it seemed like he even got a little better after 2 weeks, and he was so happy when he saw her. She felt like she was doing everything right. Sure, she was tearing away an extra piece of bread from herself, giving him the money she needed for herself, but she couldn't do otherwise because she thought she was living better than he was. So she had to help this man who had nowhere else to go. One weekend, she stopped by Miranda's house, and she told her that she was helping a homeless man who lived near the garbage dump. Miranda, though she was a good woman, she did not welcome this state of affairs. So she began to scold Adriana. Yes, really, Adriana, you've made me feel uncomfortable. Don't you have somewhere to put your money? Don't your children need it? Who in your right mind would help you? All right, if it were an old lady or some lonely orphan. It's a bum's duty. You really shocked me. I didn't expect that from you. Come on, Adriana, seriously. No one would thank you for that. So what? What's he saying to you? Thank you. These people will do anything to survive. He can't know what he'll want to do. He'll kill you and bury you somewhere else, and nobody will find you. Miranda, are you out of your mind? Who's going to kill and bury him? He's a one-legged man. Haven't you heard? He's just a sick, lonely, miserable man. And I feel sorry for him. He's in this situation through no fault of his own, I'm sure of it. And if you had talked to him, you would have understood that he is not an easy man. He is very educated. Miranda shook her hands and was horrified. No way. Talking to him, God forbid. No, no, I do not need such happiness. I have enough to worry about without it. You, on the other hand, have no worries, no troubles, no children, no problems. If you take care of a homeless man and don't take care of yourself at all, I'm just helping him, and I'll keep helping him. Whatever you tell me is your business. I'm not going to tell you anything else. You're a grown woman. You know what to do, don't you? Let's not quarrel anymore." And after a while, Adriana was seen with the bum by her nasty neighbor, Kelly. Adriana didn't notice it. Kelly, on the other hand, got a good look at Adriana talking to the homeless man. She even heard him thanking her for the money. When Adriana saw her neighbor on the street a couple of days later, she was in for a nasty surprise. Kelly was just standing with their neighbors across the street. She was telling them something, and all the women shook their heads and then laughed. As soon as they all saw Adriana, they stopped talking and looked at each other meaningfully. Adriana realized that they were talking about her. She just wanted to say hello and go home quickly. But Kelly stopped her. "Adriana, so don't rush. I wanted to talk to you for a few minutes. I don't have time, honestly, Kelly. I've got a lot to do." Kelly smirked and looked at the other women. "What kind of business are you in? I wonder if you've been hanging out with bums. I guess I've seen everything, Adriana, and not ashamed of you. You can barely make ends meet. You have 3 children. There's nothing wrong with your head, and you're giving them money. I was shocked when I saw it. Or maybe you thought you'd find a new father in a dump for your kids, but he's more like a grandfather there." The women all laughed, but Kelly looked at Adriana with triumph, as if she had caught her in something shameful and indecent. But Adriana did not consider her actions shameful. She acted out of conscience, and she was not going to answer to anyone for her actions. And she didn't care what her neighbors said about her. Let those evil gossip girls talk about her all they wanted. She was still going to do what she thought was right, and she wasn't going to ask anyone's permission. "Kelly, you'd better watch yourself, not me. Why do you care what I do and who I talk to? It's none of your business. And how do I live my life? How I raise my kids and who I give what to? It's none of your business. Mind your own business." Adriana opened the gate and stepped into the house. She heard Kelly say indignantly to the neighbors, "Look at me. What a well-meaning person I am," telling her. She was also offended at me. "I don't care if she brings that bum home. I don't care. So what if she's a businesswoman? I don't need to keep an eye on her life. I have nothing else to do." She said something else quietly to her neighbor, and everyone laughed again. Adriana was so disgusted that she went into the house so she wouldn't have to hear that nasty laugh and that nasty Kelly's voice. On Friday, Adriana took food to William again, and he thanked her with a smile. He began to eat in front of her. He could see he was hungry. It turned out that he had shared last night's food with a stray dog that wandered by the trash can. It was a pregnant bitch. William began feeling sorry for her. Adriana smiled, listening to the man. How kind was he? What more could she do to help him? They wouldn't take him to a nursing home, of course. And then she remembered Kelly's words, and she said to William, "Listen, I've got a proposition for you. I've got a little outhouse in my yard. It's nothing special. It's not a barn or a summer kitchen. It's not heated, but it's not as cold as it is outside in the winter. And there's a cot. You can live there. I'll let you in my yard. I have a summer shower behind the building and an outside toilet. It's left over from the old owners. They probably didn't tear down the old structures after they built the new house and put in the utilities. That's a good thing for you. It's probably just something that needs to be fixed or water poured into the tank above. I don't know how you look at it. Do you want to live with me? Maybe you can do something in the garden to help the household." William looked at her with such amazement. She herself did not expect to offer him such a thing, but he certainly hadn't expected it. But he smiled slightly and shook his head. "No, Adriana, you are already too good to me. I won't take advantage of your kindness. That won't do. And what will the people who know you say? No, I can't do that to you. I can't do that. I refuse your offer. But I'm glad there's a man like you. I would like to hope that you are not alone." And Adriana kept feeding the homeless man and giving him money from time to time. And she would continue to do all this. And by winter, maybe she could persuade him to move in with her, and she wouldn't care what the neighbors would say. And Miranda would be shocked. She was sure she would, but she didn't care. She couldn't let this man die who had so gratefully accepted help from her. But things didn't go as she planned, because William soon just disappeared. Adriana once didn't find him near the garbage can. She had left a bag of food on his cart, which was behind the trash cans as she was throwing out the trash. William was still gone after work, and the bag of food was on the cart. She wasn't particularly worried. Little did she know where he'd gone. But when she didn't see him there a day later, she got worried. But she became even more worried after she saw the untouched bag of food she had left the last time. Then she realized that he hadn't shown up here. She left the food again. After another day, she already realized something had happened to him. Her food was there. William was no longer sitting here. He couldn't just leave without saying goodbye to her, especially since his cart was here. So something must have happened to him. Something happened, but there was no way of knowing what. All she knew was that his name was William, and that he was a bum. That was all. Adriana had no idea what she could learn about his fate, if she had such scant information at her disposal. For a few more weeks, Adriana dragged food with her, but there was no one to give it to. And then the cart was gone, along with all his belongings. Apparently, it had been taken to the landfill when all the garbage was taken away. And that was the end of her charity work. And Adriana was sad for some reason, as if she had lost her grandfather, or a good comrade, or a good and old friend. It had been a couple of months, and autumn was already upon us. It was Saturday. Adriana spent a long time in the yard picking leaves. When she finished, she sighed contentedly. No, it was nice to have a private house after all. You fidget in the yard, breathe the fresh air. Adriana entered the house and went into the kitchen to wash her hands. And she happened to look out the window. A large Jeep pulled up in front of her house. A man in a suit and a black coat got out of it. He looked intently at her house. Then he took out a folder with some documents. He rummaged through the documents, then looked at her house again. Adriana wondered who he was and what he wanted. Why was he staring at her house so intently? He looked like a thug. But Adriana had done nothing illegal, and she had nothing to fear, but she was still scared. So she continued to watch the man. The man, meanwhile, studied all the documents. He put the file back in the car, and then he started to call someone on his cell phone. He talked to someone for a few minutes without taking his eyes off her house. Then he turned off his cell phone. He put the car alarm on and headed towards her house. Looks like he's going to her house after all. When the bell rang, Adriana flinched. The bell rang again. The kids weren't home. They were at the movies. Adriana didn't move from her seat. The bell rang again. And then there was a knock on the window. But Adriana stood still. Then everything went quiet. Adriana cautiously looked out the window. She saw the man walking slowly toward the car. And then Adriana thought about how she was acting like a child. What is she afraid of? She hasn't done anything. There is nothing to steal from her. She wasn't involved in any fraud. If anything happens to her, it's fate. You never know what might happen. And to be afraid of everything is not to live at all. Why is she acting like this? It's like she's hiding from the police, like she's a criminal. No, that won't do. And Adriana rushed out of her seat. She ran into the yard when she opened the gate. The man had already gotten into the car, but had not closed the car door. He saw her go outside, and immediately he got out of the car again. He hurried toward her. Though Adriana's heart clenched with fear, she tried to act calm. When the man came closer, he no longer seemed so scary and dangerous. He smiled at her politely. He looked about 40 years old, like her, and he smelled good. He was not a poor man, though she could tell only from his expensive car. "Hello you, Adriana," polite and friendly, asked the man. For a couple of seconds he hesitated. Adriana answered yes. "And who are you? And what did you want from me?" The man smiled and then introduced himself. "It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Liam. You can just call me Liam." "It's a pleasure to meet you too. But what do you want from me?" Is there some business you want to see me about? The man smiled again and nodded. Yes, and for very important business, may I come in? I really need to talk to you. At that moment, Adriana understood that she had opened the gate for nothing. This man was behaving very strangely. He doesn't say anything, but he wants her to let him in. Really? Let a stranger in? Yes, of course, scatterbrained. And Adriana backed away slightly. Then she started to close the gate. I'm sorry, but I can't let you in. My husband's asleep after the night shift. I can't let anyone in. He'll wake up right away. I'm sorry, you'd better go. The man held up the gate. Wait, it's very important. I absolutely need to talk to you. Would you like to talk in my car? Adriana was even more frightened. He wants to get her in the car. What's he up to? She has to get rid of him right away. No, I'm sorry, I can't. I have to go, I'm on the stove there. She was about to close the gate when she heard, You work as a janitor in a nursing home, aren't you? It's you. Adriana, covered in goosebumps. He even knows where she works, not just where she lives. What a horror. What does he want with her? She said nothing, but slammed the gate with force and walked briskly toward the house. Then she heard his voice again, and what he said made her stop abruptly. So wait, Adriana, there's no way I can explain to you why I'm here. Why are you leaving? Wait a minute. It's about William, the bum. You know him, right? You're the one who helped him. Adriana stood still. For several minutes she stood still. She saw that the man did not move away from the gate. He stood still and waited patiently. When she returned, opened the gate again, there was no more fear in her eyes. She had heard the homeless man's name, so she was definitely not in danger. She looked at the man who waited patiently outside for her. Do you know anything about William? She asked the man. He smiled slightly. So it really is you. You helped him, fed him, gave him money. For a long time I helped him, fed him, gave him money, automatically repeated Adriana, looking at the man. He held out his hand to her, and she extended hers to him in bewilderment. He shook her hand firmly. What is the matter with William? Do you know something about him? Adriana repeated her question. The man nodded. I told you that I am here on very important business. There is something I must tell you. I don't want to talk on the street. It is a long talk. Why don't you get in the car with me? Don't be afraid of me. I come to you in good faith. I'm not afraid to sit in the car. Maybe you can come to my place. I'll make you some tea or coffee. But your husband is not my husband. I only have 3 children. I just said that because I was afraid of you, but I'm not scared now. When it comes to William, you won't do me any harm, I'm sure. You really are an extraordinary woman, Liam said enigmatically. A few minutes later, he was already sitting in her kitchen, with a mug of coffee in front of him. Well, tell me why you have come, said Adriana. I have come to you on behalf of William himself. Do you know his name? Then you know who he is. Liam nodded. I have come to tell you all about him. I have come to fulfill his last request. Adriana went pale and covered her mouth with her hand. His last request was that he die. Yes, unfortunately. I'm very sorry he couldn't come to you himself, but he really wanted to, believe me. It just never got to that point. The events of the last few years took a serious toll on his health, and he couldn't take it. Tell me all about it. William was a very wealthy man. He had been in business all his life, and he was very good at it. Business acumen, sharp wit, shrewdness, charisma, and willpower. All this made him a dangerous competitor, and no one competed with him. Everyone respected and valued him. But he never had a family. He had a mistress who bore him a son. He did not want to marry her, but he acknowledged his son. However, the offended woman left him, took her son and left. It was only when the boy turned 18 that he showed up at his father's house. He told him that his mother had died, and among her papers he found letters that she had written to William, but had never sent. From these letters, he learned who his real father was. William rejoiced when he saw his son. All these years, his former mistress had not wanted him to communicate with his son. She forbade him to see him, and he didn't want to go against her will. But now he was glad to have his son by his side. He was already at the age where he wondered if he should have married in his day. After all, he did not even have any real hairs. But now he had an heir, and he was immensely happy. But his offspring was not so simple at all. He was not like his father. He was more like his mother, just as greedy, jealous, greedy, and selfish. William wanted to teach Jacob everything he knew so that he could take his place. But the son didn't want that at all. He only wanted to have fun, go out, travel, and spend his father's money. For about a year, all he did was waste money, left and right. At first, William let him do everything, fulfilled all his whims, because he felt guilty that his own son was growing up without a father. But then his patience snapped. At one point, William told Jacob everything he thought of him. And he warned his son that if he didn't get wise to him, William would leave him without money and not see a penny of his inheritance, and he would publicly disown his son. Then the lad took a different course of action. He pretended to listen to his father. Jacob was considered his rightful heir. A genetic test also confirmed it. Jacob insisted on it because he wanted to be sure that his mother had not deceived him and that William was really his father. William suspected nothing, agreed to the genetic examination. And then the worst thing happened. Jacob made up his mind to make sure. He took him into the woods, beat him himself. He left him in the woods, beaten and stripped. How had William survived? Who had found him? That was no longer known, nor was it clear who had brought him to the hospital. Here they could not find anything out. After the hospital, William became homeless. He lost his memory after Jacob beat him. One winter day, William climbed into an empty train car at the train station, and there he woke up to several conductors throwing him out into the snow. He ended up in another city, and he bumped his head again. When the conductors threw him out of the wagon, he lay there for a long time, unconscious. That's when his feet got frostbitten. That's when he lost one of his legs. He continued to wander the streets, and his son inherited all his money. And he began to spend his father's money. And no one wanted William's business because he didn't want to do it anymore. And then William met Adriana, and she began to help him. It was because of Adriana and her kind attitude and her help. William lasted so long. Well, that's what he thought. She gave him hope that he was not alone in this world. And then a miracle happened. William met an old friend of his. The man recognized William despite his inappropriate appearance. The man took William with him. He was immediately admitted to the hospital. There he remained for 2 weeks. He was given IV fluids and injections and all sorts of other procedures. That's where William remembered what had happened to him. It was immediately apparent, wasn't it? William's memory came back partially. He remembered a lot of things, but something remained beyond his memory. His son had been convicted and imprisoned. William no longer had a son, but he had Adriana now. The woman made him tremble. He could not understand how she could be so kind to him. After all, he was a nobody. He was the dregs of society. No one needed him, but this extraordinary woman, who herself needed help but was not afraid to support a homeless man, needed him. William kept meaning to find Adriana. He was going to thank her. For months he had been busy. He was trying to get his affairs in order. His son had made a mess of things, and now William had to get everything in order. But his strength was running out. All these terrible, tragic events had taken a heavy toll on his health. He began to complain of a heart condition. He was admitted to the hospital for an examination. There he had his first heart attack. He was only saved because he was in the hospital after the attack. William realized he didn't have much time left, so he called his assistant, Liam. "You must fulfill my last request," William said. "What are you, William? Why do you say that? You'll get well, and you'll be fine. You just need to get better. Let's not talk about bad things." Liam answered him. But William stood his ground. "I am telling you once again, you must fulfill my last request to find this woman who helped me so much. Her name is Adriana, and she works as a janitor in a nursing home near where I was found." William gave his assistant a bunch of instructions to follow. And now Liam was going to fulfill the last wish of his boss, with whom he had worked for over 15 years. That's exactly why he had come. Adriana was shocked by the whole story. She suspected, of course, that William was not just a bum. She intuitively sensed that he had some kind of mental trauma, a mystery that might explain why he was on the streets. But she couldn't have suspected that he had such a tragedy. How cruel his son had been to him. It's so horrible that he had no one to care for him, to love him, to support him. "I'm so glad you told me all this. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that William thought of me. I'm very glad that I helped him." Liam smiled. "But I haven't even thanked you yet at William's request." Adriana frowned. "What do you mean you didn't thank me?" "Well, you just now told me the whole story. You said William was thinking of me. I think that's the best thanks, and I helped him from the bottom of my heart. Don't even think anything of it." Well, William also decided to thank you as much as he could. When Liam told her how William had thanked her, the woman couldn't get a word out. She was at a complete loss for words. William had left her an inheritance. He left his firm to his assistant, who had been by his side for many years. William thought Liam would do an excellent job, and Adriana William bequeathed his mansion, a summer house, 2 cars, as well as an impressive bank account. And not just in dollars. Of course, all this was announced on paper, but in the presence of lawyers and a notary, and his will was legally confirmed. Now Adriana was rich, and she didn't know how to react to that. Liam left, promising to contact her on Monday to go over the details of her upcoming inheritance. That's how dramatically Adriana's life changed, just because she'd been helping a homeless man in a dumpster for months. Would she have helped him if she had known who he was? Probably not. She would have just contacted people who knew him. But her good motives were aimed specifically at William, the homeless man, not at William, the businessman. The expensive car outside Adriana's house attracted the attention of her friendly neighbors. They looked curiously at the man who got behind the wheel, a cool foreign car, and drove away. And a couple of days later, Adriana told her neighbor Miranda the incredible news about the homeless businessman. And a few days later, the whole street found out about it. And all the neighbors who had laughed at her before politely greeted her. Everyone dreamed of chatting with her, of finding out the details of the whole story, of the amount of her inheritance due to her. And Kelly continued to stare at her with anger and envy. She couldn't get over the fact that her neighbor was so lucky, and she ignored her. Though inside she was burning with curiosity, she still couldn't believe that all this had happened to Adriana. Now Adriana's life had gotten better. Now she could no longer work as a janitor and cleaner. And now she didn't have to think about how to raise and provide for her children. William took care of that.